Hey friend, thanks for listening to the Fixate Phoenix podcast. We are praying that you are blessed by this week's message. If you would like to partner with the future of Fixate, you can visit fixatephx.com/give.
Father, we thank you for this morning. God, and we center ourselves in this sanctuary to become a sanctuary. God, we thank you that in this place, every person has purpose, significance, love, safety, and belonging. God, thank you in this place that every person has purpose from you, significance from you, love from you, safety from you, belonging from you. God, we thank you that in this place, you hold it all together. In Jesus' name. And the church said, amen. We've been in a little bit of a series here. Every year in July, we do something called Townhall trainings, meaning we take one topic on a weekend, we spend the entirety of the service on that topic, but it's actually designed for you to come back on Wednesday night if you so choose. Wednesday nights at 6 p.m. What I would say this morning is we take one topic and we kind of open the door on that topic, but Wednesday night is a night that we actually invite everybody into the living room. And so this week, last week we did on doubt. This week will be on mental health. I know over the past we've done a myriad of different topics. I know our first year was just on sexuality and gender and different things along those lines. And so really excited to invite people in around mental health. We'll have some licensed therapists and counselors and people in inner healing and formational therapy that we're really excited to have a dialogue around. And Wednesday nights are a super unscripted night. All we do is put a couple chairs up here and microphones, and we have Q&A, so you can text in questions and different things like that. So very excited for, once again, the Wednesday night, 6 p.m. on mental health town hall training that we're going to do. This is called Town Hall Knowledge and Novel because this year we added another layer to this, meaning that on Wednesday night we'll have a town hall and the goal is to pursue kind of a deeper knowledge. And then afterwards, there's an ice cream shop down the road called Novel that you're all invited to come to because I personally love ice cream and it's a great idea. So 6 to 8 is town hall, and then after that, we all go out to ice cream after, if that's something you're interested in. So once again, if this topic is something that you want to do a deep dive on, I encourage you come back Wednesday, 6 to 8 p.m. Now, I want to start this week with saying this. I do not feel the pressure to be a guru on everything as a church pastor and leader. Meaning when I talk from the lens of mental health, I don't talk from the lens of like, oh, listen to me, I just know what I'm talking about. Because I think within all of us, whether you've walked through periods of darkness or questioning or just trying to figure out what's going on mentally, we all know that it's always the people who feel like they have all the answers that typically have none of them. And so for me, my journey really is this. I feel like in 2019 really was the head of my life in terms of a reorientation and alignment around not just mental health, but the healthy wholeness is what I would call it. Because what I experienced in my life was not necessarily that I walked through a season in which I was mentally healthy, as much as I came under the awareness that my mental health stemmed from unhealthiness in all of what I would call the core senses of you. Meaning that I think there's an emotional battery, there's a physical battery, there's a mental battery, right? Spiritual, emotional, physical, mental, right? There's all of these parts of us that really make up overall health. Meaning that I feel like for a lot of us, we can talk about mental health. However, if we are emotionally unhealthy, there's going to be a manifestation of that in the mental realm in which we are cognitively aware of deficiencies. And so for me, 2019 was really the capstone of a few years in which I was working full-time in ministry. I was going to school full-time. I was flipping a house on the side. And I was doing incredible things exteriorly for God, but interiorly, I was running low. And the reason is because mentally I was beginning to get exhausted from school. Emotionally, I was getting exhausted, and spiritually from being in ministry for the better part of 8 years at that time, as well as physically the grind of working manual labor on my downtimes. All of a sudden, I'm starting to realize, like, there's no amount of nap or binge watching shows that's getting me the rebound I need. And at that point, I now entered my late 20s, starting to get closer to 30, and I'm realizing my bounce back is no longer there. Whereas, like, you used to be able to rally and kind of blaze after a few rough nights. It's like, all right, I'll sleep in and take 17 5-hour energies because those were cool for a second, just a brief second. But what I realized about myself in 2019 is, like, I had gotten to the point where physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, I was drained. And not only that, I did not know how to replenish myself because I needed all of them replenished, not just one. And that really led me into a time of realignment and reorientation that is not, all right, you guys are ready for me to be like, how'd you get out of it? COVID. But genuinely, the only way I got out of it was COVID, because essentially everything stopped where I lived. In Michigan, everything stopped. It was a very suppressive state in terms of what you were allowed to do. And so literally, when you can't do anything except just sit, for me, it became a transformative and galvanizing time in which I started to rethink my overall health. And from that place is really where the birth and the dream of Fixate came from, because as I started to, what I would say in my orientation journey is step into disciplines, rhythms, habits, and routines, stacked behavior, what I started to find is that my batteries would recharge if I was just a rhythmic person. Not an impulsive person, not a chase whatever desire I have of the day person, not a whatever craving comes along person, not whatever flashy object, but rather if I would just be somebody who would be rhythmic in my pursuit of Jesus, that there was a renewal of my emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical health that took place. It's funny, the Bible talks about that we are his temple created in his image. Now, I think when we compartmentalize one part of that temple, it's like saying, all right, I'm going to take care of my living room, but the bathrooms and the kitchen are going to be really rough looking, right? When we start taking care of the whole of the temple, what we're really trying to do is steward all God has given us. And I believe in this day and age, we have an opportunity to be present to the needs of our reality, that people are starving for wholeness, contentment, and peace. And so when we talk about mental awareness and mental health this morning, like I said, this is not me being a guru as much as it is cracking the door to have a conversation on Wednesday night with some licensed people with experience around therapy and inner healing and formation, designed to get us to reorient in order to be renewed. And so today, before anybody gets mad, we're going to jump into some scripture. 1 Corinthians 19, 1 through verse 18. 18 verses today. For those counting, going to need some extra thick Bible helmets, right? 18 verses we're going to get into. Now, before we get into it, I want to add a little bit of a caveat. Today we're going to be talking about Elijah. No, we are not going to be talking about a Jezebel spirit. Which there's a new phenomenon in which we label Jezebel spirit. Men have that too. Anyway, so... Stay focused. Not even that we should label any woman. Anyway, so what's happening? Elijah, who in my opinion at this day and time would be the most proximate and powerful man of God on the face of the planet, and essentially in a few days' time, not only overthrows an entire religion, but also ushers in a time and breaks famine off, opening the skies and bringing down rain in a way that had not been seen in Israel for years. See, what people believed at that time was that God had closed up, because of the wickedness of Ahab and Jezebel, closed up the skies, in which famine, food, and the ability to take care of animals was very scarce. And not only that, it was because they had had chosen other gods. And so as this famine is growing, it says that Elijah confronts Ahab and says, listen, you bring your prophets of Baal out and we'll have a duel. And they do. They build an altar, and it says the prophets of Baal, they're crying out for Baal to bring fire down, and no fire comes down. And then Elisha asks for fire. Fire comes down. And not only does fire come down, but in typical Old Testament fashion, it says literally the people turn on the prophets of Baal and slay them, kill them all. And essentially it leads to this widespread awareness that the God Yahweh is actually the God we were supposed to be worshiping. Now, essentially what takes place then is it says that Elijah goes up on a mountain. As he goes up on a mountain, he prays that the famine would end. And it's one of my favorite stories. I preached on it a while ago called Fist-Sized Faith. Sees clouds in a distance, tells this guy that this cloud's the size of a fist. Run and tell the king rain is coming. Rain does come. Famine is broken. Religion is replaced with a reorientation back to Yahweh. And we pick up the story where this man of God has just done insane stuff. And let's see what happens right now. Verse 1. Now Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, so may the gods do to me, and even more, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow at this time. Casual threat there. Verse 3. And he was afraid, arose and ran for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, came and sat down under a juniper tree. And he requested for himself that he might die, and said, it is enough now, O Lord, take my life. I'm not better than my fathers. Now, time out here. I would have an argument at that time if I was the servant and was there, even though there was no servant there. Anyway, like, no, you might be a little bit better than your father. You literally stopped a famine. You literally overthrew an entire religion. I'd say you're doing okay, Elijah, right? Not only do we see Elijah having a disconnect with the outward manifestation of power from on high, we literally see him having a moment where he thinks he is better off dead. Once again, in the last week, this man has seen the prophets of Baal slaughtered, fire come from heaven and completely engulf his altar. He has seen the clouds open and spout forth rain after years of none of it, based off of his prayer. And his response, when he gets threatened, just kill me. Continuing onward, it says this. Verse 5, he lay down and slept under a juniper tree, and behold, there was an angel touching him. And he said to him, arise and eat. Then he looked, and behold, there was at his head a bread cake baked on hot stones. Kind of sounds good right now. And a jar of water. So he ate, drank, and laid down again. The angel of the Lord came again a second time, touched him, and said, arise, eat, because the journey is too great for you. I love that right now, in his moment of despair, there is a physical strengthening taking place. God is essentially trying to touch his physical body before the journey would be to continue. If you notice, from this mental despair, there's a physical strengthening. This is what I'm trying to get at. Continuing on, it says this. So he arose, ate and drank, and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. Then he came there to a cave and lodged there. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? He said, I have been very zealous for the Lord. This is extremely important for us to understand, and I think most people actually miss this reading when we were to study it. This is a past tense way of saying, at one point I was really strong in my faith. I have been very zealous. Not only does this show up one time, this will actually show up a second time. We're starting to see a picture of Elijah's view of his relationship, in which there was a time in which I was close, and this is not that time. Continuing onward, it says this. I've been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the sons of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left. They seek my life to take it away. I'm alone, he says. Let's add a few caveats to this. I'm alone. No one knows. no one sees. How many of us have ever had thoughts like that? I'm alone. No one knows. No one sees. See, the foundation of this despair is this belief that there is isolation in which nobody is around him, nobody's protecting him, nobody's helping him, nobody sees him. I am alone. Verse 11, so he said, go forth and stand on the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord was passing by. Just a casual line there. And a great and strong wind was rendering the mountains and breaking in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. After the fire, a sound of gentle blowing. In the ESV, this actually says a low whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle. A mantle in that day and age, there was not mass manufactured clothing. This would have been a specific cloak that he wore that identified him, was an identifying marker of him as a prophet. We see that this mantle is also referenced later on when he goes up to heaven, drops it down to Elisha. He comes out wearing it, and everybody assumes, all right, this guy's in charge. He wraps himself in his identifying marker, and he comes forward. He went and stood at the entrance of the cave, and behold, a voice came to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? Remember what I said about that second time, past tense? Here it is. Then he said, I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the sons of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left. They seek my life to take it away. The Lord said to him, go return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. And when you have arrived, you shall anoint Hazael, king of Aram, and Jehu, son of Nimshi, you shall anoint over Israel. And Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who I practiced this one yesterday, we're just going to skip it. You shall anoint as prophet in your place. It shall come about the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael, Jehu, shall be put to death, and the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu, Elisha, shall be put to death. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. Now, what I want to do is break down this order so that we can kind of start to formulate an understanding of God's response to mental, emotional, and spiritual despair from somebody who has godly awareness and understanding of the character and nature of the Father. Right? The first thing is this, and I think this is extremely important for us to understand. It says that an angel finds Elijah, and then God finds him. Now, the reason why I say this is because in verse 4, it says that he didn't go out looking for God. It says he collapsed under a juniper tree, and as he is, he cries out and says, God, I just wish I was dead. In that place of honesty and despair, it says an angel shows up. I think for a lot of us, what we don't realize is when we cry out with honesty towards God, God has a way of finding us. It's rather, do we have a disposition to see his finding? So what we see right now is Elijah doesn't say, God, come meet me right now. I'm going to need a little pep talk. He just says, kill me. And it says he shows up. Now, when he shows up, though, I think this is extremely important. The angel shows up and it says that he commands him to eat and rest. And then again, to eat and to rest. I believe this is extremely important and it kind of forms this underlying principle that I want to propose around stewardship of the physical health. See, in verse 4, 5 through 8 is what I'm quoting. What we see is that essentially if the physical health is off, the mental health is magnified. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I'm hungry. I'm going to tell you this. You want to get somebody in a bad mood? Sleep deprive them, have their kid cry through the night, and fast on the same day. Not saying that that's anybody in here or the last week. Isn't it interesting, if we're really honest, what happens when we don't have proper physical stewardship, how much it can manifest itself in mental awareness? And once again, this is what I'm trying to play on today, is that most of us in this room, or some of us I should say, have an awareness of mental health through the stewardship of what is acutely aware in my thought life. But what we don't realize underneath all of this is actually these four components that are the key to a healthy thought life. A physical stewardship, an emotional stewardship, a spiritual stewardship, right? And then a mental stewardship. See, before we could ever address the thought patterns, we needed to address the place that you need to rest and you need to eat. I love how profound in narrative that is, but how easily missed it is for us. It's like, man, we're like, God, where are you? What are you doing? He's like, dude, just rest. My therapist says this. He goes, Micah, lower the RPMs. Just breathe. Tell yourself, lower the RPMs. Like, they're not high. Before there's ever any mental stewardship, God shows up and meets a physical need. And I challenge you, when you talk about, if we're talking about mental health, how much connectedness there is to a physical stewardship as a baseline in order to produce healthy healing. Continuing on, it says this. God then listens to his honesty. If you remember, it says 2 times, people have forsaken you, torn down your idols, killed the people that loved you with the sword. I alone am left. Now they come to kill me. Ironically, this entire discourse is taking place after one of the most profound renewal and reformation moments we see in the entire Old Testament. I would only put on par Josiah the level of turn face that takes place in a matter of just 1 chapter. Meaning that all this exterior stuff can still form a life that can outpace an interior disposition that can maintain health even as it sees things outside. There can still be unhealthiness on the inside. I love it because God allows Elijah to be honest, but as he's being honest, like, how many of us have that friend where they're like complaining about the one thing and you're like, dude, you've had 11 blessings in the last month. Like, let's add some context. Or it's like, now that doesn't mean that we don't have empathy, but starting to frame, right, he's allowing honesty, but even in that honesty from an aerial perspective, we're like, Elijah, my dog, you just overthrew an entire religion and prayed in clouds to end a famine. I don't know if you're quite alone, but here is God allowing him space to feel. God offers all of us that space. Continuing on, it says that then there is the wind, there is the earthquake, there is the fire, and then the gentle blowing, the low whisper. From the gentle blowing, I love this. It says that he comes out of the cave and the Lord directly answers all his questions. Meaning, and we're going to unpack this a little bit later, is reorienting himself. Elijah has seen it all. If you think about this, right? He just prayed in clouds and a rainstorm. He has literally seen fire from heaven. I would venture to say he's probably seen an element of wind, of fire, and of an earthquake. But it's almost like this new posture takes place in which there becomes a gentle voice and a gentle whisper. And I love the imagery. It says that when he heard that, he left the cave and he walked out towards it. Isn't it interesting? I feel like when life has earthquakes, when it has fires, when it has the wind, when it is unsteady and uneven, you better believe we're all looking for a cave of protection. But something about the whisper and the blowing brings you out of that cave and into a promise, which is what we get into. Because what I love about this is from this gentle blowing, he doesn't just leave the cave, but the Lord directly answers every one of his questions. Meaning, let's unpack this a little bit. Believe it or not, you reorienting your pursuit of God, not to the fire, the wind, and the earthquakes of exterior displays of him, but rather a life of listening to the gentle whisper and understanding that gentle call. All of a sudden, every fear that he has, every worry he has, every question he has is answered from that place. It says the 2 kings he's going to go anoint. You know what those 2 kings do? Completely overthrow the very woman Jezebel, who had said she was going to kill him. Literally, she gets thrown from a window and eaten and lapped up by dogs from the street, right? Not only that, he said, I've been alone. He gives him not only Elisha, who would become his staple and the person who would take over the prophetic mantle from him, but he also says, oh, by the way, I'm not just going to give you one servant. I've got 7,000 other ones. Remember what the complaint was? I'm alone and they want to kill me. You know what God's response to him is? I've got 7,000 for you, and I've got 2 kings that'll fight on your behalf. Where did it all come from? A gentle whisper. How many of us believe and search for God in the profound, mighty acts that maybe he has accomplished, will accomplish, or you aspire that he accomplishes in your life, but miss the opportunity to learn and discern that there is a gentle voice that answers all your questions, that brings about all your safety, that protects and reminds that you are not alone. Notice the responses and the reassurances. Our God wants to bring all of us into the gentle blowing frequency, the low whisper frequency, and for you to be reminded and for you to know he sees you, he's with you, he loves you, and there is a plan for whatever you're facing. Today, with my remaining time, I want to talk about how to experience breakthrough from a breakdown. How do we experience breakthrough from a breakdown? Now, before we even jump into this, man, you guys get a great bonus story. I kind of do the same things over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And one of those things that I do is on Sundays, me and my wife drive separately here. And it's because my wife leaves after first. My daughter has her nap time that if she misses, yes. And what I typically do is on my way here, I call my brother-in-law, which if most of you have not met my brother-in-law, he's maybe been here once or twice, but he might be God's greatest gift to civilization. And my brother-in-law, this morning I had called my brother-in-law. I'm on my way to church, and the reason I do is because he's just a guy you talk to and you just are like, oh, it's just so rich. And today I'm talking to him and I go, hey, Tyler, how you doing? Good. He goes, man, you called me in an interesting time. This is on the way to church. I said, oh, really? What's going on? He said, my brakes just went out on my car. I said, okay. And he said, so I was driving from where he lives. There's about the house they live in, which is where my wife grew up. They drive about a half hour down the road, and there's kind of this little hill and a stop sign. And he said, hey, I was driving, and I knew I needed to get work done. I had an appointment on Tuesday. I'm driving. My brakes go out, and I'm so terrified. My brakes go out. I pull my e-brake. Ready for this? And he said, I put my car in reverse and drove the entire way home in reverse. This is over a half mile, just in reverse. And I immediately asked him, I said, Tyler, what's your logic? Like, why'd you put your car in reverse and drive it? Brakes are... And he looked at me, he said, well, because the front brakes were out. I said, yeah, but you still had back brakes. He goes, yeah, but if the back brakes are in the front of the car because I'm going in reverse. And I was like, that's not how that works. Like, literally, no matter how you're driving, the back brakes are still going to kick in. And he said, yeah, but I just wanted to be sure. So here I am on the way here, and I called my father-in-law after. I'm like, bro, did you hear about Tyler going in reverse the entire way home because he was worried about putting the car in drive? But what I loved about it, what I loved about that story was when he broke down, he knew what he needed to do in order to get to a place of safety, even if he looked foolish doing it. You know what my biggest pet peeve is in the church is when we know we're hurting. We know we're broken. We know that people around us notice too. But we won't give anybody space, anybody time, anybody access. We will not go to anything that would provide or supply healing, but man, we can be angry at everybody else or the situation and the circumstance for why we are what we are. Tyler literally, I'll never forget this picture of his brakes going out and him putting in reverse. And the best part was when I got on the phone with him, he was back on the road driving. See, this is what it's supposed to be, is that for some of us, we know the car's breaking down and we're not wanting to show it is. So just keep it going down the road. You're like, hey, your brakes are out. I'm good. How do you get breakdown? How do you get breakthrough from a breakdown? Is start to reorient yourself back to the place of safety, restoration, and healing needed for the journey to continue. And that is what we're talking about today. Elijah reorienting himself back to God as God and giving God the space to remind him, hey, you're not alone. Hey, I am your protection. So with that, point number one is this. There's a difference between fatigue and failure. Just because you're tired, worn down, scared, questioning, running does not make you a failure. However, fatigue can bring all sorts of failure if you do not properly reorient yourself to God's rest, provision, and voice. Health starts when your pursuit of help does. I'm going to read that again. Health starts when your pursuit of help does. Your mind, your heart, and your spirit will be restless until it finds its rest in Jesus. You know, the fatigue of Elijah was making Elijah want to think not just that he was a failure, but that he was finished. And I would even say this, you know what's worse than thinking you're a failure is you thinking you have no more purpose at all and that your life should be over. See, that is that progression, I feel like, that is oftentimes not talked about as we've talked about fatigue, right? And we're seeing this despair that sets in and God shows up and answers with the bread and the water. But also within that is, in that fatigue, there is this, I want to be finished. And I challenge you, don't let fatigue turn into failures that make you feel like I have nothing left to offer and I want to be finished. You know, my journey within therapy, before I moved here, I did a 3-month transitional therapy designed for me to fully kind of unpack 10 years of my life, late teens into now late 20s, to help kind of bring closure. And then once we moved here, I started doing weekly therapy just to keep my head sane throughout our church's kind of status of all the iterations of Fixate. And then now I do something called inner healing and formational therapy, in which I just got actually back from an intensive retreat in Ohio, and is something that we aspire to do here in the fall that you're going to be hearing more and more about. But what I'm trying to get at is not a virtue signaling of like, oh, Micah does therapy. Look, it's the pairing. It is the pairing of formation and spiritual disciplines with the holistic understanding of my mind, my will, my emotions, and what my behaviors are stemming from. If you want me to give you a recipe of health, and in all honesty, that health may not be the earthquake, the fire, and the wind of look at all God does in my life, but what it can be is you learning about how the whispers speak to you and how you respond to them. And I want to challenge all of us today, because at the end of that point, it says that our heart, I quoted something that's from a famous, I guess you could say, theologian, St. Augustine. And it says that our heart, he said this in 400 AD, our heart is restless until it finds its rest in you. I'm going to read this again. Our heart is restless until it finds its rest in you. I think this is so important because I said that this was written in 400 AD. If you think about it, this is before technology. This is before, I would say, first world global currency. This is before consumeristic materialism. This is before all of it. And there is still a restlessness in the heart of man to find what true rest is. You know, there's a fascinating, I'll probably teach on it at some point. Hebrews 3 and Hebrews 4 references a phrasing in which Paul writes, in quoting the Old Testament, that because of their sin and disobedience, they could not enter into my rest. Now, this is the only place in Scripture that you see that that word is referencing the promised land. However, it's changed and it almost attacks the mental aspects of believers in our context today. Because many of us can disassociate with a promised land, but all of us can associate with rest. Because of their wickedness, because of their disobedience, because of whatever, Hebrews 3 and 4, they would not and could not physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually enter into my rest. What if I told you the whole focus of mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical health was to enter into his rest? My second thought I have for you today is this. Spiritual maturity is when your mind starts to switch from just looking for God in the profound to the gentle blowing, the powerful to the low whisper, the extraordinary to the realization of God as a present person in my ordinary life. Maturity is inviting and learning to see God outside of the arenas I expect to see him in, the flash and bang of cultural Christianity, and that he longs to reveal to us a space of hearing the blowing and whispers of his Spirit as it affirms, guides, protects, and provides for the deep, deep needs of our souls. I wonder how tired Elijah was before the standoff, what questions that had been bubbling under the surface. Demolishing the idols of Baal, calling down rain from heaven, he had seen mighty, profound, and unbelievable things, and it led him to a place of crying out to die. In that place, the Lord speaks to him not through the profound things he's used to, but rather by passing by so closely that there's a gentle blowing that comes from that proximity. This voice that would answer all his questions, calm all his fears, and redefine his very future. I would venture to say, and I want you to grasp this fully, the gentle voice did more for Elijah's calling and for Elijah's peace than any of the miracles or moves of God that had superseded it. I'm going to read that again. The gentle voice did more for Elijah's calling and for Elijah's peace than any of the miracles or moves of God that had superseded it. The greatest thing you can do with God and his Spirit is to discern his voice and Spirit working in your daily life. How you outpace learning that is when the focus becomes on exterior displays of depth and not a disciplined and rhythmic pursuit of depth in your own life. One of my favorite personal stories of kind of past moves of God was what was called the revival in Wales, or the Welsh revival, early 1900s. A man by the name of Evan Roberts. It says that this revival was so profound in nature. There's two parts that have always blown my mind. Number one is Wales was a predominantly coal mining economy. And it said that during the time of this revival in which everybody just wanted to go to church and prayer and worship services, it literally said the mines had to shut down. They had to bring in all new oxen for the coal mines because all of the coal miners had only spoke cuss words as the commands for the actual oxen that would pull the coal carts. And so they literally had to retrain the oxen on new commands. It stopped the economy because they would not utter a cuss word. Not only that, in that day and time, Wales was a predominantly soccer or football or whatever you want to call it. I like American football. Anyway, it says that in the peak year of that specific move of God, that they literally canceled the Super Bowl of Wales. And in history, it is remembered just the slogan, revival. Listen to that. Literally, the move of God stopped the economic commerce of the day, paused the greatest sporting the attraction of that day, and reoriented it all back. Isn't that just a profound reality? But even within all of this is why I tell you this story, is because the man who essentially started this, Evan Roberts, after 10 years of stewarding this movement, would actually walk away from the faith. Not only would he walk away, but it says that he moved in spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically exhausted into a woman's house who ultimately would lead him into Some would say dark religious matters. And towards the end of his life, he would reorient back to God. But isn't it interesting that a man would see profound things that God would do on a scale that few in history could ever comprehend and still walk away? Why do I tell you that? Because you can have an exterior that outpaces your interior, and that can lead to destruction. What if God had you in the place of healing, wholeness, and awareness around mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical health? Because he wanted your life to be paced properly. My final point that I have for you today is this: the black rat. Anybody ever heard of the phrase, ring around the rosies, pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down? You know, on my Sabbaths, I like to read, which is on Fridays, I like to read historical nonfiction. Now, typically it is around pirates or World War II or World War I history. My wife likes to make fun of me about pirates. I liked Pirates of the Caribbean as a kid. Don't judge me. I thought they were great. Last few got a little dicey. But anyway, but I want to say this. Recently, there was a book. I go to Goodwill typically when I finish my book, and I just pick a random book in the thrifted section of Goodwill. And this one, I just saw a book on the Black Death, which I had known a little bit about, but I'd never really read about or studied. Now, that as it started in chapter 1, it talks about the origin of this phrase, ring around the rosies, pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down, is literally from the time of the Black Death, because, you ready for this? I'm going to break down every line. Ring around the rosies was the rash of a red ring around the sore that was unique to the Black Plague. Number 2 is a pocket full of posies, was a pocket full of flowers that people would carry in their pockets to mask the stench of the dead and dying, decaying bodies everywhere. And in our language, we say ashes, ashes, but it actually in the original was tissue, tissue. And the reason why it said that is because this was actually the final stage of the Black Plague, in which sneezing and violent coughing would take hold over the weakened body as it went into a pneumoniac state. And most actually died of pneumonia. And so if you got to that third stage where you were coughing and sneezing, you essentially, if you had tissues on you and you were using them, you were dead. We all fall down. We know what that means. The Black Plague refers to a plague of 2 years in Europe and the world in 1346 to 1353, in which estimates range 40 to 60% of the population of Western Europe was killed. Elusive in the cause, many historians and disease experts now widely believe and accept that the cause of this plague was a very small and insignificant, but very present member of the society in that day, the black rat. This black rat actually had a specific parasite it carried on the back of it that was first found in the Middle East, then brought from the shipping ports of Middle Eastern trade into Europe. The unassuming, always present, and under-the-radar city rat, viewed as nothing at all, were the very thing that would wipe out 40 to 60% of Europe's population. What's fascinating is the pre-plague number of people in Western Europe was 6 million. That number would not be reached again until 500 years later in the 18th century. A small rodent that would set back an entire population 500 years. Personally, I feel societally and spiritually, we are at a black rat moment, not from the aspect of physical death, but spiritual, emotional, and mental destruction around our views and beliefs of Jesus within the arena and awareness of mental health. We as a culture in the church have not taken mental health unawareness seriously and its role in our lives. And as citizens of a first world country and followers of Jesus, since technology's introduction as a device of every moment, mental health has become the black rat and parasite moment of spiritual proportions, killing us slowly. Knowing what we know about human nature, I do not believe Elijah just had a random identity crisis in which just one day randomly he decided he wanted to die. What we see throughout history is the enemy's playbook when we are strong and overcoming is to leave us, for the exact words from Scripture, a more opportune time as it said, as he tempted Jesus. How the devil works is the black rats of thought slipping into the cities of our minds. The small, ever-present pest of the internal self that we think are more nuisance than important. The comparison we don't realize is killing us, eroding our foundation in God. The overwork and exhaustion that has become the idol of our identity. The secret sin we will not confess nor ever talk about. The inner healing we need for wholeness that we keep stuffing down again and again. Praying alone at night, God, would you just take this away? The black rats robbing the hungry soul of the nourishment of healing, wholeness, and fulfillment that won't take seriously the small things that actually are the root cause of a fractured big picture. I ask you today, don't wait for an Elijah moment to take seriously your need to be honest with God, to be honest with the world, and to go on the journey of healing and answered prayer that has been purchased with Jesus' life. There is health for all of us, and it comes through our healer, Jesus. If you want to have a more conversation, I encourage you, come back on Wednesday at 6. Would you stand to your feet today? I ask you to bow your heads and close your eyes. We're going to take a moment to be still and to be silent. And as we are, I ask you maybe to have practice some self-awareness. Asking God, what are the black rats maybe that I'm allowing to scurry under the surface that could be bringing about a sickness, that could be leading to an erosion of my soul? Maybe some of us just have to have an honest moment in which we feel like, God, say whatever it is that you're feeling. And maybe listen to a gentle whisper or blowing that would reorient you back to his purpose and plan. I challenge you, just be still. And as you're still, we'll take a minute or two, recite the Lord's Prayer, and then worship with one final song.